Welcome to Wine Soundtrack Australia. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world.
In 30 ounces, discover their stories, personalities and passions.
Hello friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. I'm here with Sam Clarke from Thorn Clarke Wines. How are you today?
I'm very good. And how are you?
Very good. Tell us, where are you located, Sam?
So we're in the Eden Valley sub-region of the Barossa. So if you think of the Barossa, it's an area just 80 kilometres to the northeast of Adelaide, and we're at the sub-region, which is the hills of the Barossa, essentially called Eden Valley.
So tell me, what's the difference between Eden Valley and Barossa Valley?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people don't understand that the Barossa has two very sort of I call geographical or geological separate areas. So one is the Barossa Valley, which is sort of about 270 metres above sea level. It's low and flat, and the western side of that valley is quite low, and then the eastern side is a lot higher, and it reaches up to about 600 metres above sea level, and that is the Eden Valley. So strange enough, you've got two valleys sitting next to each other, but one in fact is more the Barossa Ranges, as I like to call it, the hills above the Barossa.
So what's bring the difference for your wines coming from here, from Eden Valley?
That's also a good question. So I guess one thing you see in a lot of wines from around the world is all about the terroir, about where the grapes are grown. So if you're thinking about the style of the wines that are made, it all reflects back to where they're grown. So the soils up here are quite residual, quite light, and they're quite rocky. So there's not a lot of goodness in the soils in the Eden Valley, because the place where we're sitting right now is actually the worn down teeth of what was one of the biggest ranges in the world at the time. So it actually rivaled the Himalayas, but going back 60 million years. So what you see here today is just the residual. So the soils are light, they're quite friable, and they don't put a lot of goodness back into the vineyards. So the vineyards are low cropping, therefore you get intense concentrated fruit, and you get lovely fresh aromas because we're a little bit higher up, so you maintain a little bit more acidity. So it's one of the things you see in the old world as well is the acidity, the structure of the wines, and how that's reflected in the final wines is generally very closely matched to the growing environment. So that's how the Eden Valley is different to the Barossa Valley.
Good answer. Thank you, Sam. So asking to let us know, how many hectares or acres of land do you have here?
Okay, so my family's been here a long time. So we've been here since around the 1850s, and we started growing grapes here about 1870s. One of my great-great-grandparents started to do that. And then my family, my mother and father, my mother being Cheryl Thorne, my father David Clarke, started basically planting their own vineyards around the Barossa. So there's 4 sites here, in combination about 240 hectares, and in the old language, a bit over 600 acres. So for your listeners in America, the acres will make a lot more sense. Certainly hectares are what we talk in these days.
Yeah, so true. So how many bottles a year do you produce?
Yeah, it depends on the range. So at the very, very tip of our range, we only produce a few thousand bottles. So the very, very top. So typically for us, it's a truism in wine, as it is for anything. To reach the highest levels of perfection, it is a lot harder than it is to make a good wine. So to make the great wines, so the great wines are very short supply, they're strictly allocated. And so that, as I said, a few thousand bottles, but at our what we call our starting point, our entry point for our Barossa range, they'll be somewhere between 500,000 bottles up to 600,000 bottles. So quite a difference, but you know that's wine. You know, to make the very best takes a lot of hard work.
Yeah, so I saw on your website, so you have 5 different ranges, yes, of wines.
That's right. Yes, there's we love making wines, so it's easy to get a bit over enthusiastic, and we've ended up making quite a few different varietals. So one of the things that Australians are quite well known for, I think, is being fairly innovative. Like we don't mind trying new things, and and of course a lot of us have European heritage, so we love to try things from Europe. So we've predominantly been French varieties, starting from the inception, but these days we're trying Italian varieties, Spanish varieties. In fact, we grow some Graciano, which is quite famous from Rioja. yeah, we're sort of quite experimental. So those 30 different wines we might have and the 5 ranges is part of that story.
So tell us, how much do you sell here in Australia and how much do you sell overseas?
Yeah, well, we've always had a big export focus, Australia being geographically quite a long way from the rest of the world. But again, that heritage that we have, a lot of us are quite recent migrants in the sense that, we can go to other parts of the world and we see opportunities. So for us, 70% of what we do is exported. It's exported mainly to countries that we have a deep connection with. So the USA, Canada, the UK, but equally we export to all the major markets in Europe. And these days, Asia's become an incredibly important market. Australia repositioned itself politically many years ago in the 70s and 80s when the EC or the EU kicked us out, essentially. And we now sell around 30 to 40% of what we do goes into Asia, particularly Japan, South Korea, Indonesia. All those countries that we used to fly over years ago are now really important to us.
In America as well, because when I did my course of Master Sommelier, one of the wines that was in the tasting with the Master of Sommelier was Thorn Clarke Shiraz.
Oh, wow.
So you are in America as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, our agent there is a Master Sommelier, and one of his 2 IC is also a Master Sommelier, and it's fascinating working with those guys. My background's not in winemaking, so I've been to the States, many times. And whenever I'm doing tastings, I've got my agent there. His name's Frank Casella. He's a fantastic, he started his own business from scratch. And he tasted our wines back in 2001, 2002. And he literally didn't realise the time zone difference. So he rang back here at the winery, 2:30 a.m. in the morning. And my mother and father were staying here, and he rang them up and got them out of bed, essentially, and said, I've tasted your wines, I love them. I need to buy them. Where can I get them? And he became, and still is, one of our most important customers. And he's passionate about wine, but he also understands that as much as we love it, we've also got to sell it. So it's been really fun working with him. And if you ever get talking to him, it's just not wine. It's the stories that you tell, but also the food you eat. So he does a big trade taste in the US where you'll have 12 different styles of oysters, east-west coast of the US. You'll have a rack of yak, as he calls it. You'll have a sushi bar, and you'll be tasting, you'll have an Alsace Pinot Gris, and you'll then say, well, that matches perfectly with this, and you'll go to Moselle, and you'll get out a Riesling, and that is where the passion comes through. So those places I travel to, it's really exciting to meet the people in the trade, as much as it is to taste the wines, and yeah.
Taste wine's always so fun anyway.
Yeah, it is one of the benefits.
So tell us your first memory relevant to wine.
Oh, okay. It's a hard question. I guess years and years ago, my grandparents, Ron and Sadie Thorn, they've had a vineyard. My uncle now has inherited it from them. They've both passed away, but they one of the only downsides of being from a family that's been in wine for a long time is that you get chosen to pick the vineyard when it comes to picking the vineyard. And when you're about 8, 9 years old, I might have been even younger, my grandparents would be out picking the vineyards, and basically the whole family had to go out and help. And my earliest memories were as a young boy is being dragged out there and picking fruit for my grandparents for free, of course. There's no payment, and picking grapes, you get cuts in your hands, you're sort of reaching down, getting into and so you end up with sticky sugar and cuts in your hands, and it's stinging, and it's normally about 34 degrees or more. And that's my earliest memory. It wasn't wine specific, but these days I look back at it and sort of reflect. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun in the sense now looking back on it, not at the time, but it's fond memories.
Tell us, do you still remember the first time you drink wine?
Oh, see, it's interesting. Some families, they take the attitude, the French particularly, we can have a little bit of wine with our food, with our children, but my family very strict about alcohol, and it was quite well into my 20s before we were sort of allowed to indulge too much. But My probably the wine stories that sort of come to mind are the terrible things you did when you were 17, 18 years old, and your mates get together and they buy the cheapest bottle of wine possible, which normally in Australia used to come in flagons. So flagon was a big bottle, and normally you drink far too much and you'd end up being a little bit ill. But one thing that comes with age and maybe a little bit of common sense is that you'd start to end up drinking better and better wines. So the beginnings are never that highfalutin as some people like to say.
So do you believe in perfect variety? Like, do you have any favorite variety?
Ooh, okay. That's an interesting question. Varieties, I guess one thing I do like about the varieties are the ones that really shine through as being distinctive. So there's some varieties that, particularly environments, are probably not the best suited to. Sometimes they can be a little bit same. So you look at them and go, well, one variety I really get a lot of pleasure out of being involved with is Riesling. And Riesling is a variety that most people don't commonly associate with the Barossa. But the Eden Valley area, particularly the southern Eden Valley, is well known for its Rieslings. And they're quite dry and they're steely and they're aromatic and fresh. In our climate, we've got a warm to hot climate. So these wines really exhibit the characteristics of where they're grown, but equally they're so enjoyable on a hot summer's day with seafood, which I happen to love. So it's a variety that, for us has been a real, one of my favourites. Yeah.
And I guess to be in Eden Valley, growing Riesling is perfect match.
It is, exactly. So the soil type, the height, the continentality of Eden Valley too, because when you think of great Riesling, continental environments are really important. So you get really cool nights. So the Mosel and Rheingau, all these places that have some easily the world's best Rieslings, they all have that one feature. So Eden Valley is a little bit trapped from the sea. So when you go to the valley floor, the Barossa Valley floor, there's a little bit of sea influence. But as you get to Eden Valley, it's a lot more continental. I think that's one of the reasons why it grows so well there.
Yeah, I have tasted so many good Riesling in Eden Valley. So, how much do you probably have a cellar? Yeah.
I do, and I've done some Wesset training recently. I finished my diploma last year. I'm starting to get to the point where I had to get some studies done, Priscilla, before I got too old. So I actually, my cellar was mainly Australian wine, and I've ended up now with a cellar that's across the world. It's been a lot of fun. My biggest problem is finding time to drink it all. And so one day, when I retire, I'll get around to it. But, yeah.
Do you know which the most expensive bottle do you have in your cellar?
Yes, actually, the one that comes to mind, I've got a 1965 Latour, which is it's a 3 litre, which my father bought at a Christie's auction back in London many years ago, and I've held on to it. And each time I read the back catalogue and it says 1965 wasn't a great year, I think, damn, maybe I should drink it. But I haven't brought myself to the point where I want to crack it open. So one day I will. But yeah, I've got a few other great. I've got the Centennial wine for Australia. So I've got a lot of little gems down there. But just as I said, finding the time and the moment to taste those wines, that's actually the hardest part. But yeah, one day I will.
So do you believe people should age wines or people should drink wines?
Oh, look, far too many people drink wines young. And I think if you're really going to enjoy a great red wine, you really have to give it time. And I've also got a wine fridge and a wine cellar. And I just remember pulling out a 2012 Shotfire Cortage, which is our Cabernet blend. And I pulled it out and it had just been at the perfect temperature. Opened it. It was under screw cap, of course, because screw cap for us is just gold. And the wine was sensational. So it'd been in bottle. It was only, I think, last year. So it'd been in a bottle probably seven years. And just looking at that wine, thinking, well, I tasted that when I was young. In 2012, very good vintage in the Barossa. Really had high tannin structures. And when it was young, they were a bit grippy and a bit sort of out of balance. But then, 7 years later, you taste it and you think, well, you've got time and patience. They certainly do reward cellar. Yeah.
So actually, it's just very good topic. Cork or screw cap? in Australia we have so many wines with screw cap. Tell us.
How can you ask me that question? I mean, it's no, I'm only joking. It is to me, and look, there's still a lot of argument about it. But to be honest, I don't understand why there's an argument about it. It's so emphatically screw cap, but still, I've got friends who've just done, like I was talking about the Western Diploma, and one of them's a highly regarded somm, and he swears by cork, and I go, well, why? Why? I mean, screw cap, it gives you all the pleasure of the wine without any of the cork taint issues. And to be honest, it's not cork taint's a major issue. It's not. Amarim tell us they've solved cork taint. Well, they haven't solved oxidation, and they haven't solved random oxidation or aroma scalping or all the things that go on. And I've had a lot of first-hand experience getting phone calls from importers from the other side of the world saying, Sam, this bottle, and that as a producer, I can't say highly enough how much better screw cap is. It guarantees the end consumer, hopefully all your lovely listeners, please indulge me, buy a screw cap, because as a producer it takes a lot of stress and worry off my mind to know the wine is closed under that closure versus cork. But we still use cork. I just have to say there's one disclaimer, the customer's always right. And the South Koreans still love cork. So there are some markets where they're very loyal customers, but they won't accept screw cap. So, I'm passionate about it, but at the end of the day, if customers want cork, we can acquiesce.
In America, you use more cork as well?
We have, and certainly on the higher end ranges. So on the high end ranges, we do hand select cork, 44ml cork, very expensive cork. And if you're prepared to pay for the high-end wines that we produce, that's what we do. But to be honest, we have experimented with screw cap there as well. But there's certain consumers who simply won't accept a $80, $100 bottle of wine under screw cap. But therefore, we use the highest, most expensive cork you can buy. And it does the job. But honestly, if I think as the Z generation comes along and hopefully gets more wine involved, they'll understand that there's actually a real argument for why you just use screw cap across the board.
In Australia, it's fine, yeah.
Some restaurants won't take cork. I mean, you literally, if you're in a busy restaurant serving in Australia and you're paying someone $25 an hour to serve and they're having to stand there and take the cork out and do the whole wipe, and you can just say, bang, there you go, pour the glass, don't need to taste it. As a restaurant owner, if I was ever in that game, that's what I'd be saying. I'm saying it's got to be a screw cap. I'm not going to get faulty wines. I'm going to get return bottles. I'm going to get upset consumers, and that's nirvana to anyone. Anyway, I'm biased, so I probably shouldn't say anymore.
Easier to have a screw cap. So, question. Just imagine a VIP person overseas or in Australia drinking Thorn Clarke wines on the table, and then some magazine just coming around, take a picture, and they put in one of the famous magazine in the world. Just imagine this VIP person. Do you wish he will be some actor, some singer? Do you have anyone in mind?
Oh wow! So what you're asking me is do I follow the Kardashians or not? Well, no, I'm a little bit more intellectual than the Kardashians, I'm sorry. I'd rather someone who'd achieved great things, a Nobel laureate, someone I'd rather Mr. Dyson invented my Dyson vacuum cleaner that actually works, because one of my jobs when I was a kid was to vacuum clean the house, and I'd have someone who had actually made a difference to the world. I'm not a big follower of celebrity for the purposes of celebrity itself. So yeah, I would have someone who had really achieved something in the world and really helped people, whether it be solving the riddle to cancer or saving lives in some other way.
That's so good. Question: each vintage, it's a different story or not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things I love about wine. In my pre-life, before I joined my family at the winery, I used to work in the mining industry. So the mining industry is digging up the same thing time and time again at the lowest possible cost and selling it as a commodity to the end user. So there's no love, there's no passion, there's no difference. It's all about removing the differences, whereas wine is all about accentuating the differences, is looking for those special things that make it unique. So every vintage is different, And it's really the fun. So, you talk to guys who've been in the business for a long time, and you taste a wine and go, hey, remember that year then? It rained a lot. I mean, you can see the softness in the fruit, the sort of the more savoury red fruit notes, and go, yeah, I remember that year. And then you remember, you might go another vintage or pull another one and go, yeah, taste the ripeness and the fullness of the body. And so to me, it's part of culture, but it's also part of recollection wines. So it can tell a story.
The wine is pretty much about the story behind of each label, each vintage.
Exactly, yeah, and that's one of the reasons we've used a lot of the family history in our wines. And is that whenever we sat down and we talked about what would we want to call the wine and how would we want to explain it, we came back to things that were important to us and things that we loved, and a lot of the family stories came through in those. So one of our main ranges, one that's actually sold a lot in the US, is called Shotfire. Now, Shotfire, it originally started off as Shotfire Ridge, and we kind of made it a little bit shorter. The story is one of my ancestors was a gold miner in the southern Barossa, and one of the jobs in gold mining back then was getting explosive and setting charges in the rock and blowing it up. The job that he had was a shot firer. In other words, one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. So we named that wine in honour of him. And he was a successful gold miner. He lived to a ripe old age, and he had a hell of a life. So we like those stories, like the fact that you've got some things in and around, and yourself and the area you live in, and the vineyards and the wines that are interesting. It makes the job a lot of fun. You can get out there and tell people. And in Australia, we're famous for our, as we said, iron ore, alumina, coal, and we're famous for commodities. But I like to think that as Australians, we've got a great story to tell, and with our wines and even our foods these days, there's a lot more other stories to tell, and that's what I find fun about wine, about export too, is going out and around the world and telling people about what we do here, and people not knowing necessarily about our wines, and sharing it with them.
When you tell people overseas eating kangaroo, people don't believe me.
Yes, yeah. Look, I think people have got to, if you've got an ecological streak or an environmental angle to your life, you've got to think the hooves and the methane out of cows is bad for the environment. So the way I love it is it's lean meat, it's game, it has low in fat, it's low cholesterol, it's not a hooven animal, it's adapted to our natural environment, and there are literally millions of them. That's one thing that people don't understand, is they say to me, how can you shoot those things? Well, in Australia at the moment, there's probably as many kangaroos as there are humans. And you can't actually legally shoot them here unless it's for destruction only. You can't eat them. It has to be by a licensed shooter, generally from a helicopter, and then it's killed instantaneously by a licensed shooter. They knock them. These guys don't miss, by the way. They go headshots. They're taken to a special abattoir. They're butchered correctly, and it's one of the most sustainable meats you'll ever come across. So it's to me, I love it, but I can understand why.
I have to agree. I love kangaroo as well. Sam, tell us, when you were very little, what did you want to be when you grow up?
Very easy question. I wanted to be a pilot. Now, I know every boy.
Pilot?
Yeah, and I've got my pilot's license. I got it when I was about 18, and I was a really nerdy kid, so I loved to sit there and read my pilot books and dream about flying, and I got to do it, and I was at university at the time when I got my license, but I realised soon after that I was probably every other boy in Australia wanted to be a pilot as well, and it was one very competitive job to get into. And I was at uni and I was doing pretty well, and I thought, well, I'll stick with it, and one day I'll get back to it. And 30 odd years later, I'm still thinking one day I'll get back to it. I'd like to. One of my dreams is to buy a plane. Doesn't matter, it's just an old plane, and to spend a bit of time flying around the Barossa and maybe flying around Australia. So I'm still getting there. I'm only just over 50, so I reckon I've still got a good 10, 15 years I'll get it done.
So excited to be flying around Barossa. It would be very nice. Nice pictures afterwards. So, have you ever paired white wine with meat or red wine with fish? What do you think about the concept about white fish and red and meat?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a bit. A pairing does have a place, but I think you can get a bit bound up by it. I mean, try different things. For me, I guess when I'm tasting these wines, it's good. It's good to have an open mind, and I guess I'm sort of sitting on the fence here, aren't I? But I do see the reason for it. They're talking when they say white and red. I guess what they're saying to my mind is the strength of the flavour. It's not really about whether it's red or white. It's the strength of the flavour, how it's being cooked. So really, red meats typically are quite strong compared to white meats. So. Yeah, there is a reason for it, but be honest, I sort of don't sit down and get too stuck into it. Probably one of my loves though is, red wines and a bit of blue cheese sometimes, and they talk about Pinot and dark. Yeah, I can see those sort of things, but be honest, it's more about the strength of the flavours in the meat than the colour of the meat, to my mind.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. So, how this wine passion started? How did it come up? How was your story behind and the back? Like you just told me your dream was to be a pilot, and how we are here in your winery in Eden Valley.
Yeah, well, my mother and father started the winery. So Thorn Clarke is named after my mother and father, and they started in the late 80s. So my mum grew up in a vineyard, and she wasn't necessarily that keen on having her own vineyard one day, but my father was the reverse, and he was quite successful in the mining industry, and he and her decided in the end to plant their own vineyards, as I was saying earlier, and they said, well, one day we'd like you to join us in the business. So they were planting vineyards, and look, they didn't have a lot of ideas about how to make the wines, and we didn't have a full-time winemaker, and so I came back in 1997. I was living in London at the time, and came back, and it was a very rough operation, is probably the best way to put it. But we had a consultant winemaker join us, a guy called Jim Irvine. Now Jim would have done at that stage about 50 vintages. So he had been around, and he had started back in the 50s and 60s. And you can imagine Australian wine was not what it is now. It was an unknown industry outside of Australia. It was making mainly fortifieds, and it was completely different. But I spent a bit of time with Jim, and I remember we were walking through a barrel hall, and this was quite a big barrel hall, and he said to me, Sam, look, we're going to taste a few of these barrels. And I was, 27 years old, and I'd been drinking a bit of wine, a bit of beer, a bit of spirits, whatever. That was just, it was just lifestyle. It wasn't my passion. And so we stopped at a few barrels, and he pulled out the wine thief into a glass, boom, boom. And he started explaining to me, okay, here we are, American oak, French oak. Now this is Cabernet, that's Shiraz. It started explaining the flavours and the styles. And it sort of opened up a whole world of these things that you never really think about until you've got it presented to you. And he was someone who'd done 50-odd finishes who really knew how to communicate about it. And I think that's one of the things I learned is, we can all be passionate about these things, but one of the key attributes you've got to have is you've got to be able to talk about it and communicate with people who aren't necessarily wine interested. So, but anyway, getting back to Jim, and that was where I really started. I mean, Mum and Dad had sort of brought me into the business, and I was 27, but I hadn't had any experience in the wine industry up till then. And he just opened my eyes up to the things that you can really see and with wine, which you get people who are fairly sceptical. Oh, I can't see the terroir in that wine. What do you mean the acidity? And you think, well, actually, if you look and you compare, there's a lot of things in wine that you just need someone to guide you, to start you on the journey, and away you go. So that's where it grew from.
Good story. Complete this sentence. A day without wine is like. A day without wine is like any other day, but no, actually, I don't drink during the week as much as I'd like to. So a day without wine is a bit of a boring day sometimes. It's good to relax. I like to relax at the end of the day, put my feet up, put the Netflix on, nice glass of wine. It's just a nicer day. How's that? Wine you make, do you have any, probably have been around the world and seen different wine regions, but do you have any other wine regions you would like to have a look and to have a visit to explore more?
Yeah. I was lucky to go to Spain a couple of years ago, and I've been to Napa, and I guess I've been around to a lot of areas where else would I like to go? I mean, I'd love to go to Champagne one day, and I'd like to go actually to Alsace, as much for the food as for the wine. The other place, I've never been to South America, and my dream last year, I turned 50 last year, was to go to, we had a trip planned, we're going to Machu Picchu, we're going to go across to see my younger uncle in Rio. It was all planned, and I would love to go to Mendoza as part of that trip. And then, of course, you know what happened last year. It all got cancelled and we haven't been able to go. So I would like to get to South America one day and get over to Mendoza and see, because it's such a different climate and what we're used to here in Australia. It's sort of the extreme ends of winemaking. It'd be really exciting to go. And I've seen some great wines from that part of the world. So, yeah, if I was going to say anywhere other than Champagne, because I know my wife would love Champagne as well, would you get to Mendoza?
Yeah, Mendoza is beautiful. I lived there for 4 years.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Well, yeah. Look, well, you've been very lucky then. So,
yeah, it was very nice Malbec over there. So I recommend it, and a lot of meat, Malbec and meat.
Yes. There's a few good Argentinian restaurants around here, down in Adelaide if you get a chance, Oster and Gauchos. So, yeah, I could enjoy that. That would work.
What do you actually recommend for your wines, pairing with your wines?
Look, depends on the wines, but certainly the Shirazes, you're talking sort of your well-done red meats mainly. Lamb is, one thing I noticed when I've travelled around the world is how few people appreciate lamb outside of Australia. Maybe you have to go to Greece or something like that. Greece's National Day yesterday, so congratulations, Greece. And so we normally, when I'm talking to people about it, we're talking about red meats mainly with the red wines. With the white wines, there's quite a selection. You're full-bodied. Our Chardonnays are more Chablis-like rather than Meursault-like, so they're sort of more that green apple, maybe a little bit of tropical fruit some years in the warmer years, but you can go anywhere from chicken all the way down to your seafoods, etc. So it's one thing is not to lock yourself into just one set of flavours. I think, particularly if you're tasting Australian Shiraz, well, you should try and hunt out some lamb somewhere, just so you get the quintessential Australian experience. Yeah.
That's so true. Like here, we can actually see a lot of lamb in all the menus. So I would like to ask you if you are ready for all game.
Oh yes, okay, bring it on. Why not?
So I will tell you someone famous, and then you need to tell me which grape variety and why you choose that grape variety, right?
Okay, I'm ready. I'm going to put my thinking cap on.
So Sam, if I choose Bobby Marley.
Bob Marley. Other than marijuana, I reckon he would be up for something like a GSM, a Grenache, something sort of savoury but laid back. Yeah, that'll be Bob. Yep.
That's a good answer. If Michael Jackson.
Oh, Michael. We won't say anything bad about him. I love his music. But yes, okay. So what would Michael? Well, he was a pretty zippy character. He moved around the stage. He had some wild moves. I'd say he'd be a Riesling man, personally. Yeah, I'd say Riesling.
So, Thorn Clarke Riesling?
Absolutely, yeah. The Sandpiper Riesling, I think, would be right up his alley. Fresh, clean, zippy, aromatic, fresh. That's Michael.
So, let's talk about politicians. The Queen?
Oh, the Queen. I love the Queen. She's done an extraordinary job. I think she'd go with something just lovely and mellow and classic. So I think she would go with something like the Thorn Clarke Shotfire Cortage, which is a Bordeaux varietal blend. So Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, a little bit of Merlot and Petit Verdot. I think the Queen would be on song.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like the Queen definitely had in Trump in America.
Do I have to answer that? What would Trump drink? I think Trump, given he's got gold taps and a gold toilet, I'd say he'd only go top shelf. So he would go Ron Thorn. It's Ron Thorn Shiraz. It's our single vineyard. It's our top flight Shiraz. We only make a very small amount, and that would be him. I don't think he'd accept anything less. Yeah, he's got high hopes of himself and high opinions of himself. So, but nothing against the wine. I love the wine. Not so much Trump. Yeah.
Oh, well done, Sam. And let's talk about football, soccer. Maradona. Do you know Maradona, right? Tell me yes.
I do know, and it's sad to see he passed away recently. The hand of God. He was an exceptional footballer, but maybe not so much an exceptional person when it came to things off the field. That's my personal opinion. Don't hold it against me. Maradona, I think he would take anything that had some illicit drugs in it. And none of our wines do. So I'm pretty sure probably nothing in our range would satisfy his penchant for. I'm not sure. Maybe he'd go. We do have a lovely vintage port, so it's about 18 degrees alcohol. So maybe that's enough for a rush for him to get his lips around.
Yeah, Porto then, so fortified wine for Maradona.
I think fortified. I think would go for the biggest kick in the bottle. So yeah, it's a 2015 vintage port that we make. Lovely and rich and ripe, and a bit of alcohol behind it as well.
Good. And Bill Gates.
Bill. He's the man who gave us DOS and so much blue screen activity on Windows. But he's a very great philanthropist. Gives a lot of money away, sorry. So he, what would he go for? I think even though he's one of the richest men in the world, I think he's fairly tight with money. Very tight with money. In fact, he strikes me as someone who's got the same pullover every year. So I would go something. We do have a range that sits beneath Thorn Clarke even. It's called the Cool Woods range. It's some of the most value-driven wines we make. So I'd say he would go the cheapest bottle on the list. Not the second cheapest, the cheapest. So I recommend for Bill, I'd go the Cool Woods Shiraz. That would be our wine of choice.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you so much. Can I ask you a favor, please? Would you like to remind us how to reach your cellar door here in Australia and your website?
Oh, sure. So our cellar door is just outside of Angaston. So if you are in the neck of the woods, it's more than happy to invite you here anytime. So it's at 266 Gawler Park Road, Angaston. Most people these days connect with us on our website, which is thornclarkewines.com.au. That's one word. So Thorn has no E and the Clarke has an E. So thornclarkewines.com.au. Equally, obviously, you can get on our Facebook. We're even on TikTok these days, only just recently, and it's trending. It's definitely a trend. I've never used TikTok in my life, but we've got some young guys here who are really all over it. So that's a lot of fun. Instagram, of course, and Twitter. So any of those ways to connect with us, that'd be great.
Sounds good. So follow Thorn Clarke in TikTok as well. So pretty good.
Yeah, you won't find me on TikTok. You'll find someone else there. But I'm more the Facebook crowd, the older set. So yeah.
That's good. Thank you so much, Sam.
My pleasure. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack Australia. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.